Many thanks for staying with us and welcome to another edition of Channels Beam. I am Victor Matthias. Now, following his decision to remove subsidy on fuel, President Bola Tinubu made a request to the National Assembly to obtain a loan from the World Bank, from which 8,000 naira will be given to millions of households to cushion the effect of the subsidy removal. Similarly, the president also declared a state of emergency over food security. Now, the presidency directed at all matters of food and water availability and affordability to be regarded as essential livelihood items to be included within the purview of the National Security Council. Now, today on the program, that will be our focus. We'll take a look at all of this. But before we begin to take a deep dive into the feasibility of these policies, let's see what made the trends in the past week.
Nigerians reacted, albeit sordidly, as news broke that authorities in Seychelles had banned Nigerians from gaining access to the island, which had become a very popular vacation and honeymoon spot for many Nigerians. The country later claimed the ban was due to alleged drug trafficking activities being carried out by Nigerians. A similar ban was placed on Nigerians some years back by authorities in Dubai, another popular vacation hub for Nigerian tourists. Newcomers in the Nigeria Professional Football League, Sporting Lagos, claimed the Made in Nigeria Super 8 tournament after beating Rema Stars 4-2 on penalties in the 10th final inside a sold-out Mobolaji Johnson Arena on Sunday, claiming the 25 million naira cash prize up for grabs.
There you go. Those were the trends in the past week. But joining us to look at the topic of the day, we have joining us via Zoom from Lagos, Ayodele Adio. Ayodele, it's a pleasure to have you join us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We also have joining us right here in the Abuja studio, Adejo Chojo. It's a pleasure as well to have you join us on the show today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely. We also have joining us via Zoom from Abuja, Hamzat Lawal. Hamzat, it's a pleasure as well to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me, Victor.
Absolutely. So kicks out the conversation for us, Hamzat. Of course, you've seen the, how would I put it now? Let me call it a directive or a policy that has just been, moved by the presidency, especially looking at the fact that a state of emergency has been declared, on over food security in the country. Looking at what the measures that have been put in place to ensure that, we achieve the security of food, availability, and affordability of water as well. How soon do you think would arrest the situation at hand?
Well, declaring a state of emergency means that it has to be arrested as soon as possible. And I like the fact that it's relatively clear when you look at the policy statement by Mr. President. They say they're going to provide hectares of land. They're going to collaborate with the Ministry of Water Resources to ensure irrigation. And they're looking at also inflation. So it was a declaration of state of emergency on food security and inflation. But one thing that is also key here is tackling insecurity itself, because a lot of farmers in rural communities cannot go to their farmlands to cultivate because there's no guarantee of safety of lives and properties. So first, if we can guarantee safety of lives and property, and what this means is that the National Security Advisor have to coordinate with the service chief to deploy more men, procure more hardware, and put in place infrastructure, both hardware and manpower, to ensure that they're able to guarantee safety of lives and property. But then when we now have cultivation and harvest, we also need to ensure that when this harvest can find their ways to the market, because, we lose tons of food because there's no adequate measures to store them, and there are no means to transport them because of dilapidated infrastructure in terms of road network.
So it's a connected stuff, so to speak. Now they have to go in hand. That's the implementation now of all of this. So clearly, I mean,
yes.
Yeah, I was just looking at how this can be coordinated moving forward. The implementation.
Yes. Yes, the president was not quite quite clear in terms of coordination. And this is also because we don't have ministers in place. Because even when the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development and that of Water Resources needs to work together, they don't have someone who is manning this ministry, and it wasn't clear who is going to coordinate. Yes, we know that Hadiza Balausman sort of coordinates or advises the president on policy issues, but you need a ministerial portfolio holder to coordinate and lead this, because right now, who do we hold to account, or who's the stakeholder actually engaged in the implementation of this policy? No one.
Some would say the permanent secretaries, but I'll come back to you again in just a minute. Jojo, let's get your take on this. Especially with regards to coordination of all of this policies that need to be implemented. To arrest the food insecurity, that the country is currently facing.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me once again.
Yeah.
The issue around coordinating the implementation is very important. And what I do believe is that beyond not having ministers, just like Hamzat has said, there are other ways this can be done. And I think the time calls for radical thinking and innovation to make that happen. So off the top of my head, one way I can think is that they need to partner with other stakeholders. And this could be other institutions. So for example, faith-based organizations. To give you an example, just yesterday, I've not been in Abuja, I just flew in last night. And what I saw from where I worship, family worship center here in Abuja, was that the church itself went on to be able to provide palliatives to people. And after service, people were able to take a few things home to make that happen. Now, the issue around implementation, why it's critical is that if you leave it to the standard traditional way of implementing programs like this, you might have cases where whatever palliative, whether from the Strategic Greens Reserve or anywhere, might actually be hoarded by non-state actors or perhaps even state actors as well. So my thinking is that the government needs to be a bit more innovative and forward-thinking in how it approaches matters like this. They can partner with field-based organizations, like I said, even entrepreneurs and business owners, as well as different institutions to make this happen. The issue here is that if we go the old method or the way things have been done, we may not exactly get the results that we're looking for.
What are those old methods?
So the old methods typically would be that, for example, maybe it would be designated to a ministry or perhaps a committee to kind of like dish out these palliatives or have some sort of programs for that. However, we have seen cases where this didn't get hoarded. And reference case in point, look at the issue around the 2020 COVID-19 palliatives. However, we can actually collaborate more with other stakeholders. And I do believe that, for example, the government would have access to businesses that have been perhaps paying their taxes, and they can partner with these businesses and say, how many employees do you have, for example? Who are the located employees, and how can we basically work with them to do things better? This, to me, would be a lot more effective than perhaps going the old route of perhaps going through a committee or someone that perhaps would find a way to even monetize it and sell it off in one way or another.
All right, very well. Let's wait and see how that's going to play out. But let's quickly go to Lagos, where Ayodele Adio is joining us via Zoom. Ayodele, one of the key components is, the issue of insecurity. We've had countless incidents where farmers were attacked by bandits and whatnot, in the northeast, in the northwest, and all of those areas where farming pretty much, is the mainstay. So in this instance now, how can we, what have we done, first of all, to tackle insecurity, first of all, before we begin to look at the other components, that would be part of the implementation that we're looking at?
Well, I mean, it's too early to judge. I mean, it's been space of 1 month to clearly state that a few things has been done to deal with the crisis, particularly in the north central states, which, the food basket of the country. I mean, there is a clear plan from the military chiefs, but of course, I'm yet to see the policy direction in terms of national security from the National Security Advisor. And the president is yet to articulate, a grand plan in terms of our national security architecture. But I can tell that there has to be plans going underneath to ensure the safety, of farmers across the entire country, because without farmers feeling safe to go to farmlands, it will be impossible for us to achieve food security in our country. So to that extent, even though we haven't seen a clear policy in terms of national security in place, I am a bit hopeful that, with the new NSA in place and the new military chiefs who come, with stellar credentials, a few things will be on the offing to put together some sort of a holistic plan to deal with insecurity in the north central states. Of course, insecurity in the northeast have been dealt with to a very large extent, and I would imagine that the same has happened in some of the northwestern states, because the frequency in which attacks used to happen in states like Katsina and Zamfara, and in Kaduna has reduced drastically over the last few weeks and over the last few months. So this momentum has to be sustained. And of course, we need to make tremendous gains in the north central part of the country. And if we're able to do that, then we can begin the conversation of having food security, because really and truly, today the numbers are out that inflation is at 22.7%. And you know that the major driver of food inflation in our country is food. Household expenditure. Households spend 65% of total household expenditure on food. So until we're able to deal with food inflation, we'll not be able to deal with the broader inflation that we're dealing with. And key to dealing with food inflation, aside infrastructure, and of course, aside dealing with the floodings, particularly the ones that happened last year, and ensure that it doesn't repeat itself, would be insecurity. And I hope, because of course now the president has even situated his food security plan also as a national security emergency, I believe that there will be plans on the way to ensure that is decisively dealt with.
Very well. Let me just quickly hold you there and bring back Hamzat. Hamzat, looking at again, at the whole issue of insecurity, like you said, it's pretty much too early to judge. But from your own perception, how well do you think we're doing since, especially in that respect, since the announcements were made, of the new service chiefs? Do you think they've made the first impression that they're ready to go, and take, the bull by the horn?
Yes, I think they've made a decent impression, because what we've seen is some service chief go to the field to, provide confidence to the men on the ground. But and we've also seen
is that enough? I mean, because is that enough, Hamza? Because that seems to be the norm when new service chiefs are appointed. Is that enough?
No, it's not enough. But one element that's also important is trust, particularly around the public, the role of the public and how we gather intelligence. And this is why, the National Security Advisor must rise to the occasion and the challenge and provide that policy framework around intelligence gathering, around mobilization, and the kind of action that is needed to tackle insecurity, around the country. And I think we're doing quite well right now, because when you look at the numbers, it's actually dwindling. But we need to sustain the momentum and nip it by the bud, ensure we're able to mobilize resources, but most importantly, collect intelligence and inform our actions based on data that we get from intelligence community.
So, in clear terms, now this is not just for the security chiefs or the security apparatus. Nigerian citizens also have to play their own part by providing intel. Where it comes. Let me just hold you there. Absolutely. Let me just hold you there for a bit. Hold all of you as well. We need to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a moment to, of course, continue the discussion. That's coming up in a moment. Please stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. We still have with us our panelists right here in the Abuja studio, as well as via Zoom. Chojo, let me get your thoughts on this. Because first of all, the removal of subsidy, came in. So the president feels people are suffering. So the food part of it also, trying to put that, in check, is also to ameliorate and to alleviate, the sufferings of people. And while they're trying to do that, they've also talked about, delivering, 8,000 naira to the poor. We've had instances where this has been done. How effective was it in the past? And, how effective do you think it's going to be now?
Well, I'm a bit concerned personally, because we have seen situations where some of these things perhaps were maybe communicated as being hidden results, but practically people do not see the effect of whatever has been done. I do hope that the president, beyond feeling, knows that Nigerians are suffering, And it's a case where, for me, I'm not one to advocate for money being tossed or thrown at people. However, I'm one for innovating around how we can go around this. Now, if you look at what the president has said, 8,000 naira, if we're being realistic, to me, it doesn't really cut it. If you look at the price of things today, you would wonder where 8,000 naira would get you. So, for example, just coming to your studio today, the price of egg, from what I could see from the survey, is about 18 naira to 100 naira, depending where you buy from. Now, bread is 800 naira to 1,000 naira, depending where you also buy from. So let's assume, let's say, an average family size of 4. Typically, you buy 1,000 naira bread today. Most likely would last you, maximum case, two days. Do that for an entire 30-day period. It doesn't really take you anywhere. So for me, it's how can we innovate around the current situation that we see in our country, and also how can we now develop much more practical strategies to helping alleviate poverty and the problems that we face right now.
Hamzat, I mean, you've consistently followed the money. I mean, that's what we know you for. In the past, we've had this conditional cash transfers. Like the president said, this time around it's going to be digital. We've had the conditional cash transfers, and we've also had over-the-table payments. From the ministry, in the past. Going by that, and also looking at the current realities, obviously with the removal of fuel subsidy, the prices of things have skyrocketed. How effective would this be?
In the past, I always call it conditional cash payments. But now what it's saying is there's going to be a money trail, so we can see how the money moves from accounts to accounts. And when the money, the 800 billion was on the table, we engaged the World Bank, we engaged the federal government. And for us, we want to ensure that all the loopholes are closed. All the leakages are closed before this money is disbursed. Yes, 8,000 for 6 months. Mind you, it's not just one-off. It's going to be for 6 months and targeted, I think about 10 million households. It's not enough, but it will go, it will go a long way to providing that palliative to cushion the initial effects and that shock that the economy is currently facing with the removal of all subsidy. But I think that we need to look at more of sustainable production, because Nigeria is a consumption economy. This monies would be given to people. I'm sure 99% of the people would use it to buy, food for their household. So how do we produce? How do we become an economic backbone that produces and create industries that create jobs and create, dignity in labor? So I think that, again, this is one thing the current administration needs to look out for. How do we create jobs? How do we ensure economic growth and create decent jobs so that we can end poverty and ensure that we're also feeding our nation, but also feeding West Africa and exporting our goods around the world?
Again, that's one thing I quite agree with, the fact that we need to move from being a consuming economy and all of that. But ideally, moving forward, what can we do differently? Because this is for a particular time, So after then, what next?
Well, listen, to be honest, our problems are crystal clear, and our problems are unemployment and poverty. So the question on the table is, what do we do to tackle unemployment and poverty as a country? The president, in his plan, says he wants a double-digit growth and he wants to double GDP the next 6 years. Now, how are you going to do that? You're not going to do that simply by putting a 500 billion naira palliative. That is just barely scratching the surface. So if you asked me what I want to see happen, I want to see small businesses stimulated across the country, which means that I want to see a huge intervention of funds that are disbursed through microfinance institutions across the country, where small businesses can access this funding at very low interest rates. Because if we allow businesses to short, what will happen is that we'll inadvertently increase poverty and unemployment. So I want to see a targeted plan to ensure that businesses remain open. And for that to happen, it means we must allow small businesses have access to cheap capital. The second thing I want to see happen is that we talk so much about the unification of the exchange rate and the removal of petrol subsidy as the sine qua non to our economic revival. But that is not, that's just only half the truth. The only way that our Naira is going to strengthen is if we build a productive economy and if we're able to export enough value-added products that we can attract foreign currencies into our country, which is foreign exchange. So what I want to see happen is an industrialized policy across the 6 geopolitical zones in tandem with the state governments. Because one thing that has been left out of the conversation is because this focus has been solely on the federal government, and we seem to have excused state governments. State governments have to be a part and parcel of this industrialized plan to begin to situate industrial clusters across the 6 geopolitical zones so that we can power productivity, so that we can create jobs, and so that we can export, across not just the continent, but even to the entire world. If our economy is not able to do that, it doesn't matter how much palliatives that you disburse or distribute in the economy, we are going to continue to exacerbate poverty and unemployment. So I really want to see an industrialization plan powering businesses with the potential, even if it's just 6 businesses across the 6 geopolitical zones, to put funding and state-back resources behind them to ensure that they create well-meaning jobs and we can export these products across the African sub-region, even if it's for the initial stance before we even go global.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that I want to see in the coming months and perhaps in the first 1 year of the Asiwaju administration.
Well, that, like they would say, our baby steps. So we're still counting and hoping that, like you said, perhaps in the next 1 year, we might see more interventionist funds that might take a look at, those businesses and hopefully would spread and also exports beyond Nigeria, West Africa, perhaps, to the world. You never can tell. But we'll have to wait and see how all of that is going to play out. But I would say thank you to you for joining us today on Sharing Your Thoughts. I really, Adio, the managing editor at the Avalon Daily, as well as Hamzat Lawal, the chief executive at Connected Development. Thanks as well for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, Victor.
Absolutely. So just as we wind down, I mean, what can we do differently, honestly? Like, he has said he's given his own piece, or 2 cents, as we usually say. Let's get your 2 cents before we wind down the show.
Well, I think the solution to the problem is not a palliative strategy. Personally, I do believe that the solution to the problem is in Nigeria's energy transition plan, because it details different kind of opportunities that can be made available to small businesses, can transform the way we basically consume, the way we live, and also our transportation systems. For example, I'm particularly of the opinion that if the state governments, for example, can mobilize support to be able to transition from using, let's say, petrol-powered kekes and motorcycles to electric-powered kekes and motorcycles, that would do a number of things. It would stimulate the economy, it would help a lot of businesses innovate and provide so many other solutions and value-added services that we desperately need at this time. Yeah.
It will also help the environment.
Yes, definitely. It will also help the environment. Yeah.
Well, I have to stop you there. I think it's a good note to hold the conversation and say thank you to you as well for joining us on the show today. Well, that's where we are. Thank you so very much for being a part of the show. I'm Victor Matthias. We'll leave you with the movie videos on our YouTube channel in the past week. Bye for now.
In 5th place, kicking off this week's top 5 videos, the father of UTME candidates accused of forgery, handing over everything to God.
Nigeria and the whole world should know the truth.
The 4th spot is taken by bombardment of a vessel filled with stolen crude oil by the military.
To do your hand.
It is followed in 3rd by the meeting of President Bola Tinubu with class of 99 governors at Aso Villa.
Honorable, it's good to see you again.
say abduction.
Second spot is taken by the funeral of the founder of FCMB, which was attended by Vice President Kashim Shettima, Aliko Dangote, former head of state General Yakubu Gowon, amongst many other prominent Nigerians.
July.
While the arrest of 15 suspected hoodlums arrested over shooting in Ebonyi to enforce a sit-at-home takes a first spot.